I sat down on the white-painted wooden chair, facing my parents and my two younger brothers in the familiar kitchen I once considered home. The aroma of pot roast and garlic bread filled the air, evoking memories of family dinners from my childhood. But tonight, something felt different. Nathan and Lucas, my twin brothers, leaned back in their chairs, their expressions triumphant. My parents, David and Margaret, exchanged a quick glance before my mother spoke, her voice carefully composed. "We want to talk to you about an important decision." I set my fork down, feeling the tension rise within me. "We've finalized our will," my father continued, his tone steady but lacking its usual warmth, "and we want you to hear it from us now, so there's no confusion later." Nathan leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, a smug smirk forming on his lips. "To put it simply, everything goes to us." I froze. "What?" Lucas repeated it, his tone light, as if delivering an unimportant announcement. "Mom and Dad are leaving this house, the beach condo, and all their assets to us. You get nothing." The room suddenly fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic from the quiet suburban street outside. I turned to my mother, hoping she would deny what I had just heard. But she only gave a small, firm nod. "We think this is for the best," she said, clutching the napkin in her lap. "You have a stable career, a solid income, but Nathan and Lucas are still finding their way. They need more support." I turned to my father, waiting for an explanation, some sign of hesitation, but he simply stared down at his glass of water, avoiding my gaze. Pain surged through my chest, mixed with rising anger. I had done everything for them. For over a decade, I had paid a large portion of their mortgage, covered countless medical bills, and even helped Nathan and Lucas multiple times when they couldn't handle their own finances. And now, this was how they repaid me? "So after everything I've done, you've decided I don't deserve anything?" My voice wavered despite my efforts to keep it steady, but I couldn't hide the deep hurt behind my words. My mother sighed, her eyes filled with disappointment. "Evelyn, you always make everything about money." I clenched my hands under the table, the sharp sting of betrayal piercing through me. "It's not about money," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's about fairness, about how I've always been there whenever you needed me, but now, just because I'm independent, because I don't rely on you, I have no value to this family?" Nathan let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic. No one forced you to help. You just liked playing the martyr." Lucas chuckled too, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us?" His words hit me like a slap across the face. I turned to my parents, waiting for them to correct him, to reprimand him for his cruelty. But nothing. They stayed silent. And in that silence, I understood everything. I swallowed hard, the pain swelling in my throat. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself. "All right," I said, my voice even. "If that's your decision, then I have one of my own." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what's that?" I pushed my chair back and stood up, my heart pounding. "From now on, don't expect anything from me." I turned away from the dinner table, leaving behind their stunned expressions. The scent of pot roast and garlic bread, once comforting, now felt empty and meaningless. As I walked out the door, no one stopped me. No one called my name. No hesitation. And I knew, in that moment, everything had changed. I stepped out of the house I had grown up in, but this time there was no sense of familiarity, no lingering attachment. The warmth of family dinners and childhood security had long faded. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that couldn't be undone. The night air was crisp, but I felt a burning heat rise to my temples. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio like I usually did. I needed the silence to process everything. Why was I even surprised? Hadn't I always known that, in their eyes, I was nothing more than their financial safety net? Back in my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling as I unlocked my phone. The conversation replayed in my head, every word cutting deeper. Nathan and Lucas were getting everything. And me? The one who had paid for their mistakes? Who had covered Nathan's tuition every time he switched majors? Who had sent Lucas money when he wanted a new car for his social media image? I was left with nothing. I opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me like a brutal reminder. $1,900 every month. The amount I had been sending to my parents to cover their mortgage and expenses. Another $1,200 for Nathan and Lucas every time they called, complaining about money problems. My parents said I was successful and didn't need help. But what would happen to them without my support? Could they even keep their home? I hovered my finger over the automatic transfers section. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. For years, I had accepted this burden as my responsibility. But this was their choice. They didn't need me. They had made that clear. No one was forcing me to continue. 1 second. 2 seconds. I pressed cancel. A notification popped up. Recurring payments successfully stopped. A wave of emotion crashed over me. Anger, bitterness, but also something else. Relief. I set my phone down, sinking into the couch, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I had carried for far too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the past years in my head. The vacations I had turned down to cover their mortgage, the late nights working overtime to send Nathan tuition money, the sacrifices I had made believing they mattered. But now that I needed just 1 ounce of recognition, one sign that I was appreciated, they couldn't even give me that. The next morning, my phone rang non-stop. Ma? I hesitated before answering. Evelyn, did you cancel this month's payment? Her voice was sharp with worry, but she masked it with that familiar tone of disappointment. I took a deep breath. Yes, Mom. Because I realized I don't have to do this anymore. She was silent for a moment. What do you mean? Family supports each other. You know we rely on that money for the bills. I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. Mom, family only matters to you when I'm paying for everything. I've helped for years, but in the end, I still don't mean anything to you. You're being selfish, Evelyn. Her voice rose. Why are you acting this way, just because of the will? Everything isn't about money. I laughed, but not out of amusement. Not about money. I was the one paying the bills for you, for this entire family. If money doesn't matter, then why don't you ask Nathan and Lucas to take care of you instead? Silence stretched on the other end of the line. I could picture my mother's face. Angry, frustrated at being confronted. I can't believe you're acting like this, she finally said. This isn't the Evelyn I raised. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight in my chest. Mom, this is me. But you never really saw me. I hung up before she could say anything else. Standing there in my apartment, emotions swirled inside me. I knew she would call again. Dad might try too. And Nathan and Lucas would definitely jump in with their mockery or accusations. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to answer. I was no longer the family's ATM. I was no longer the only one carrying the weight. I had let go, and it was the best decision I had ever made. I set my phone down on the table, feeling both weightless and heavy at the same time. Mom had said exactly what I expected, accusing me of selfishness, of betrayal, of abandoning the family. But what she didn't realize was that I had heard those words so many times that they had lost all meaning. I looked around my apartment, suddenly seeing it in a new light. It was no longer just a stopover between work and endless bank transfers to my family. It was mine. The only space where I didn't have to carry anyone else's burdens. I opened my laptop, pulled up my bank statement. The list of monthly expenses stared back at me. Transfers to my parents, to Nathan, to Lucas. A constant reminder of the dependency they had placed on me. Not anymore. I canceled them one by one, each confirmation feeling like a sharp, clean cut from the past. $1,900 for the mortgage, gone. $600 for utilities, gone. I sat there, staring at the screen, which now showed no active recurring payments. And for the first time in years, I felt free. But strangely, an emptiness crept in. I had spent so much time, so much effort being the responsible daughter, the one who carried what Nathan and Lucas were never asked to. Now, without those obligations, what was I supposed to do with myself? I stood up, poured a glass of water, sipping it slowly. Outside the window, the city buzzed on, life moving forward. And yet, I felt like I had just stepped into an entirely new world, one where I could set the rules. My phone vibrated, a message from Lucas. "What the hell are you doing? Nathan just told me you cut off the money. Do you think this is funny?" I read it, but didn't reply. A few minutes later, another message popped up. From Nathan this time. "You're a traitor. Don't expect anyone in this family to see you as one of us ever again." I smirked, not because I was happy, but because I finally saw the truth. I was never truly part of this family. I was just their sponsor. I put my phone down, stepped onto the balcony. The night breeze brushed against my skin, cool and refreshing. I took a deep breath. I had done the right thing. And nothing would make me turn back now. The next morning, my phone rang non-stop. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. Slowly, I picked it up. Mom's voice burst through the speaker before I could even say hello. "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" she nearly shouted, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "Why did you cancel the payments? You know we need that money to cover the bills." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I've helped enough." "Helped? You're abandoning your family. Have you even thought about how this affects us? We sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us?" I let out a dry chuckle. "Sacrificed? Do you not see the irony in that? If I owe you for raising me, haven't I already paid you back by funding this entire family?" Mom hesitated, but then her voice turned sharper. "You've changed, Evelyn. You let money control you." "No, Mom, you let money control you," I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. "But I'm not your personal bank anymore." She exhaled loudly and hung up without another word. I stared at the screen. Then more messages flashed. "Nathan, you're ungrateful. Mom's crying because of you. Lucas, you think you're so smart? You'll regret this one day. Nathan, don't bother showing up at our parents' funeral when they're gone." I read each message, anger bubbling beneath my skin. Not one apology, not one question about why I had done it. They didn't care how they had treated me all these years. They were just mad because I had stopped funding their lives. The phone rang again. Dad this time. I let it ring. It kept ringing. I turned off the ringer, then went into my settings. Lock. Nathan. Lock. Lucas. Mom. Block. Yeah. Block. Once I was done, I set my phone down, closed my eyes, and exhaled. Silence filled my apartment, a rare and unfamiliar peace. No more ringing, no more messages filled with guilt trips, no more manipulation. I stepped onto my balcony, breathing in the crisp morning air. This peace felt foreign, but also incredibly freeing. For the first time in years, I was truly free. 3 weeks passed in silence. No more relentless calls, no more guilt-laden messages from Mom. I began to believe they had finally accepted the truth, that I was no longer their financial safety net. Then, on a Friday evening, a message appeared on my screen. "Family meeting, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Don't be late." Short, cold, no explanation. I looked at my mother's message, feeling a sinking sensation in my chest. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, smaller yet persistent, whispered that maybe this was the last chance for things to get better. Maybe, after everything that had happened, they truly wanted to have an honest conversation with me. I decided to go. As I stepped into my parents' house, the tension in the living room was suffocating. Nathan and Lucas were already seated on the couch, arms crossed, their expressions cold. My father stood near the fireplace, while my mother sat in the armchair, her eyes red and puffy as if she had been crying. Before I could speak, my mother did. "Evelyn, I don't understand you anymore." Her voice trembled. "How much further do you want to go in destroying this family?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" My father let out a heavy sigh. "You've put us in serious financial trouble. If you keep being stubborn, your mother is going to break down." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So now I'm the reason Mom is exhausted? What about all those years I carried this family financially? She seemed just fine then." Nathan scoffed, shaking his head. "You always make everything about money. Do you really think the world revolves around you?" Lucas leaned forward, arms crossed in defiance. "Come on, you have a good job, a comfortable life. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? You're just paying the price for being selfish." Their words cut deep. I had come here hoping for a genuine conversation, but all I was met with was manipulation and pressure. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "If this is why you called me here, then don't waste your time. I'm not coming back." My mother's face went blank. "What did you just say?" I stood up, taking one last look around the house. "I have done everything I could to be a part of this family. But if my worth to you is only measured by how much money I bring in, then I don't need that kind of love." No one said a word as I turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. I left, for good this time. 2 days later, when I returned to my apartment late at night, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My front door had been sealed shut with industrial foam, covering the doorframe and handle. I reached out and touched the hardened material, solid and cold. Someone had done this on purpose. I took a step back, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't some harmless prank. This was an intentional act to keep me out of my own home. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and checked the hallway security camera. I fast-forwarded through the footage from earlier that evening. And then, there it was. Lucas, wearing a baseball cap and a hoodie, but his posture and stride were unmistakable. He smirked as he held the foam spray can, carefully filling every crack and crevice of my door. My hands trembled with rage. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I handed over the footage as evidence. One of them nodded as he watched the video. "Do you want to press charges?" I gripped my phone tightly, a chill running down my spine. If I let this go, it would only escalate. Lucas wasn't just angry. He was willing to cross the line to retaliate. I took a deep breath, my gaze firm. I want him held accountable. The next day, my phone rang again. I ignored it. Then Dad. Then Nathan. Finally, I picked up. "Evelyn, your brother got called in by the police. How could you do this to your own family?" My father's voice was harsh, but I responded calmly. "Lucas vandalized my property. If he doesn't want to face charges, he needs to pay for the damages." My father's tone dropped. "How much?" I didn't hesitate. $3,000. "How could you extort your own brother like this?" I let out a dry chuckle. "It's not extortion, Dad. It's called consequences." The next morning, my account received a $3,000 transfer, with a bitter note attached. "I never want to see you again." I read the message and felt nothing. A notification lit up my phone. A message from a distant relative. "Evelyn, is this true? People are saying you abandon your family even though they're struggling." I frowned. Another message came in. "Evelyn, how could you cut off your parents and brothers like this? They took care of you your whole life." I opened social media and immediately understood what was happening. My mother had been spreading a completely false story. She had written a long Facebook post claiming that I had turned my back on my family in their time of need, that I was selfish, only cared about myself, and had left my aging parents and struggling brothers with nothing. People who didn't know the full story flooded the comments, offering sympathy to her and vilifying me. I scrolled through the responses. So sad when successful children forget where they came from. Parents sacrifice everything for their kids, and this is the thanks they get? Evelyn must have let money get to her head. Anger flared in my chest. Not because of the stranger's passing judgment, but because my own family had rewritten the narrative, turning me into the villain. They didn't mention that I had paid the majority of my parents' mortgage. They didn't say that I had covered tuition bills and even personal expenses for Nathan and Lucas. They left out the fact that Lucas vandalized my apartment and that I had to call the police to protect myself. They only painted the image of a heartless daughter who turned her back on her family. I sat in silence for a few minutes, thinking, should I stay quiet? Ignore everything and let them control the narrative? No. I had endured their manipulation for far too long. I opened my app and tapped on New Post. If my family wants to make this public, then let me tell the truth. And I started writing. I laid it all out. Every dollar I had sent over the past 10 years. The money I had spent to help them keep their house, pay for tuition. Even the funds Nathan and Lucas used for new cars and vacations. I spoke about how they had always seen me as an ATM, not as a daughter or a sister. I exposed how Lucas had sealed my apartment door with industrial foam, forcing me to involve the police. I didn't turn my back on my family. My family never saw me as part of them, unless I was bringing in money. And now, I choose to stand up for myself. I hit post. Within hours, my post caused an uproar. Relatives started asking questions. Some commented surprised because they had never heard these things before. An aunt messaged me privately, asking if it was true that I had financially supported my family for years. Some extended family members even began calling out my mother for twisting the truth. But the strongest reaction came from my immediate family. Mom called immediately. I answered. Her voice was so furious she was nearly incoherent. Evelyn, what the hell did you just do? I remained calm. I told the truth, Mom. If you have the right to tell your version, so do I. She was breathless. You're humiliating this family. Your father is so ashamed he won't even leave the house. Have you thought about how this makes Nathan and Lucas feel? I clenched my phone tightly. Did they think about how I felt when Lucas vandalized my home? Did they think about me when I was breaking my back to pay their bills? She went silent. But then, as always, she twisted the situation. You're destroying this family. Her voice grew cold. If you do this, don't expect to come back. We are no longer family. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Mom, you destroyed this family, not me. And I hung up. No tears, no regret. For the first time in my life, I felt relief. I had lost my family, but maybe they were never truly my family to begin with. That phone call with my mother was the last time I heard her voice. After my post, my family went completely silent. No more angry messages from Nathan, no more furious calls from my father. All contact was severed, as if I had never existed to them. But this time, I didn't feel guilty. I was free. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. The evenings I used to spend solving my family's financial problems were now mine. No more desperate late-night calls. No more canceled plans because someone needed my help. I threw myself into work, channeling my energy into a major project my company was developing. With laser focus, I not only completed it ahead of schedule, but also secured a promotion. On the day I received my promotion letter, I stood in my new office, looking out over the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling proud. For the first time in my life, I could enjoy my success without feeling obligated to share it with anyone. And then, I decided to travel. I had always dreamed of taking a long trip, but every time I thought about spending money on myself, I was pulled back into my responsibility. But now, nothing was holding me back. I booked a ticket to Italy. When the plane landed in Florence, I felt like I was stepping into an entirely new world. The cobblestone streets, the outdoor cafes filled with the scent of espresso, the historic buildings whispering stories of the past, it all made me feel more alive than ever before. I wandered through Florence's narrow alleyways, spent hours in museums marveling at Renaissance paintings I had only seen in books. I ate the freshest pasta of my life, sipped rich red wine as the sun set over the terracotta rooftops. I was no longer the person who constantly worried about others. I was no longer my family's bank account. I was just me. One late afternoon, I was sitting in a small cafe near Piazza della Signoria, enjoying a hot cappuccino. "You seem to really like this place." I looked up, meeting the warm gaze of a stranger. He had light brown hair, a relaxed smile, and an effortless confidence. "I think I just fell in love with this city," I replied with a small smile, taking a sip of my coffee. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me without asking, as if we had known each other for years. "Me too," he said. "This is my third time coming back." I raised an eyebrow. "A loyal traveler, huh?" "You could say that. My name's Alex." "Evelyn." We talked for a long time. He was from New York, worked in interior design, and had a deep passion for European architecture. His voice was calm, steady, sometimes laced with effortless humor. I couldn't remember the last time I had talked to someone without pressure, without tension. With Alex, there was no pretense, no expectations, just a simple, chance encounter. A genuine connection between two strangers. As I stood up to leave, he smiled. "If you ever want company while exploring Florence, I'd be happy to join you." I hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I think I'd like that." The next few days felt like a dream. Alex and I wandered through local markets, sampled gelato, and walked along the Arno River as the golden sunset painted the sky. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't probe into my past. He just saw me for who I was in this moment, a woman finally embracing her freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt valued. Not for my money, not for my responsibilities, but just for being me. One evening, as we sat on a rooftop terrace, I gazed at the glowing city lights and smiled to myself. I had once believed that my happiness depended on my family. I had once thought that if I gave enough, they would love me the way I wanted to be loved. But the truth was, I didn't need to beg for love from people who never truly valued me. I could create my own happiness. And right here, under the Italian night sky, I knew I was doing exactly that. After returning from Italy, I stepped back into my life, but with an entirely new mindset. I was no longer the Evelyn who sacrificed everything for a family that never appreciated her. I was stronger, freer, and more myself than ever before. The months that followed were peaceful. Work thrived, I joined Sunday yoga classes, met new friends, and finally embraced the life I had put on hold for too long. But then, news about my old family started to surface. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from Aunt Linda, my mother's cousin. "Evelyn, I know you don't care about the family anymore, but your parents are really struggling. Your father is working night shifts at a warehouse, and your mother is taking hourly cleaning jobs. They both look exhausted." I paused for a moment, staring at the screen. I had seen this coming. When I was financially supporting them, my parents never once considered standing on their own. They relied on me as a lifeline, never stopping to think if I was tired. And now that I had cut them off, they were forced to face reality. I set my phone down without replying. A few days later, I heard from a friend that Nathan had lost his job due to poor performance, and Lucas was still chasing his dream of becoming a social media influencer. But getting nowhere. I wasn't surprised, and I no longer felt responsible for them. They had the chance to change, to learn independence, but they didn't. And now they had to face the consequences of their own choices. I once thought that not spending Christmas with my parents and brothers would make me feel lonely, but as the holiday approached, I realized that I had people who truly cared about me, and that was what mattered most. I decided to host a small gathering at my apartment. Aunt Daisy arrived early, carrying a box of homemade cookies and a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, Evelyn," she said as I welcomed her in. I smiled. "You're the only person in the family who's ever said that to me." Daisy looked at me, her eyes filled with both understanding and sadness. "I just wish they had realized your worth before it was too late." I didn't respond. Instead, I poured her a glass of wine and invited her inside. One by one, my friends arrived, bringing wine, desserts, and laughter. That entire evening, I laughed more than in any Christmas before. No forced conversations. No pressure to meet anyone's expectations. Just me, being happy on my own terms. As the clock struck midnight, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the twinkling Christmas lights across the city, and felt something I had never truly felt before. Please, no more invisible burdens. No more feeling used. Just me, my life, and the people who truly loved me for who I was. And that was the greatest Christmas gift I could ever receive. I sat in my armchair, watching the city lights reflect against my window. Outside, the world kept moving, cars and people filling the glowing streets. But inside me, there was a stillness I had never known before. I had once believed that family was everything, that I had an obligation to sacrifice for them, no matter how they treated me. I had convinced myself that if I tried hard enough, if I gave enough, they would finally accept and love me. But the truth had been far different. Family isn't defined by blood alone. Family is made up of those who appreciate you, those who don't take advantage of you, those who love you without conditions. And my parents, Nathan and Lucas, they had never truly seen me as family in that way. I thought back to the way they cut me out of the will, as if to make a final statement that I was worth nothing to them except for my money. They believed that would break me, that I would beg for their acceptance again. But what they didn't realize was that they had unknowingly given me the greatest gift of all. They had severed the last remaining tie between us. They had set me free. I had once been a woman burdened by responsibility, expectations, and sacrifices that were never appreciated. But now, I had the power to choose my own life. I could go anywhere, do anything, and never again worry about a call demanding money or a guilt trip for not obeying their wishes. I could spend my time with people who truly loved me, friends who stood by me, even when I had nothing left to give. Aunt Daisy, who had quietly supported me all along. I could love and be loved freely, in a way I had never experienced before. My eyes drifted to my phone on the table. There were no missed calls from my family. They had let me go. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that. I picked up my glass of wine, taking a slow sip, letting its warmth spread through me. I had once lived for my family. Now, I chose to live for myself. And that wasn't selfish. That was freedom. Evelyn's story isn't just personal. It reflects a reality that many people face in society. We grow up believing that family is the safest place, that love always comes with responsibility. But the truth is, family bonds don't always mean appreciation. Sometimes, walking away isn't selfish. It's the only way to protect yourself. When you are constantly being used, when your sacrifices go unrecognized, you have every right to put yourself first. Because in the end, this life is yours. What do you think about Evelyn's story? If you were in her position, would you keep sacrificing for family, or would you walk away to find yourself again? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more meaningful stories about life and family. I stood in front of the large glass doors of the upscale restaurant where my father, Richard, was celebrating his 60th birthday. The warm, golden light spilled from inside, reflecting on the glass, creating a blurred image of myself. A 31-year-old woman in an elegant dress, yet feeling like she didn't belong here. I had hesitated for a long time before coming. If it weren't for my aunt, the only person in the family who truly cared about me, I would never have stepped foot into this party. She had called me last week, gently urging, "Lana, he's still your father. At least stop by and say hello, and if it doesn't feel right, you can leave." So here I was, knowing full well that in this party, I was nothing more than an outsider. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Soft music from a live band in the corner played through the air, blending with the lively chatter of hundreds of guests. Just as I expected, my father had thrown a grand party, not just to celebrate his birthday, but to reinforce his status in the business world. I walked toward the check-in table, where a neat row of name tags had been carefully arranged. I skimmed through the familiar names: Uncle Peter, Cousin Emily, family friend, Mark. But when I found mine, I froze. The small tag in front of me didn't just have Lana written on it. Beneath it, in delicate handwriting, 2 words had been added. Garden. For a moment, I thought I had misread it. I blinked, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, a soft yet unmistakably mocking laugh rang out. I turned around and, unsurprisingly, the person standing there was Margaret, my stepmother, holding a glass of red wine, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Oh dear, Lana, you look so tense. It's just a joke," she chuckled, the triumph in her gaze unmistakable. "A joke?" I clenched the name tag in my hand. Maybe to her it was just a joke, but to me, it was a cruel reminder that I had never truly belonged in this family. My parents divorced when I was 9. At the time, I didn't fully understand what it meant, only that from then on, my father no longer came home every night, and family dinners were just me and my mother. At first, he still cared about me. He took me to the park on weekends, occasionally called to ask about my schoolwork. But just a year later, he remarried, a refined, sharp-witted woman with 2 children of her own, Max and Olivia. From that moment, everything changed. At first, I tried to fit in. I was just a kid and I wanted my father to be happy. I had hoped that we could be a real family, that I would still have a place in his life. But I was wrong. The changes started subtly. My father became busier with his new family. He forgot about our outings, but never missed Olivia's ballet performances or Max's soccer games. Then it became more obvious. Family dinners turned into reminders that I was an afterthought. Max and Olivia were doted on, while I was pushed further to the margins. I was given chores they never had to do. If Olivia spilled something, I was expected to clean it up. If Max didn't feel like washing the dishes, I was the one called to do it instead. And if I ever complained? "Lana, you're older. Be mature," my father would sigh as if I exhausted him. Margaret, on the other hand, didn't bother with subtlety. She would simply smirk and say, "You're such a selfish child." But the final straw came when I was 17. My mother, despite not having much, had saved every penny to open a college fund for me. It was money she hoped would help me afford school without worrying too much. Then one day I checked the account. It was empty. I didn't understand what had happened until I overheard a conversation between my father and Margaret. "Richard, we have to pay Olivia's tuition. If we don't send it soon, she'll lose her spot at the academy." Margaret's voice was calm but firm. "I know. But that's Lana's money. Lana can go to a public school. She doesn't need an expensive education like Olivia. Besides, she's not particularly talented anyway." My father was silent for a long time. Then I heard him sigh. "All right." And just like that, every cent my mother had worked so hard to save for me was spent on Margaret's daughter. I confronted him. I yelled, demanding to know why. He just looked at me, his eyes weary. "I'll make it up to you someday." But someday never came. After that day, I barely spoke to my father. The moment I turned 18, I left home, earned scholarships, and worked to pay for college. I only attended family events when my aunt insisted. I thought that, after all these years, maybe things had changed. But now, standing in the middle of my father's extravagant party, holding a name tag that read burden, I realized something. Nothing had changed at all. Margaret was still Margaret. My father was still the man who never stood up for me. And in their eyes, I was still an outsider. I slowly placed the name tag back on the table. This time, I wouldn't stay silent. Margaret was still standing there, taking a sip of her wine as if her little joke was nothing of importance. In that moment, memories of being overlooked flooded back like a tidal wave. I remembered the holidays during college when I walked through the front door, only to realize I had no place there. My mother had tried to fight for my stolen tuition money, but my father had better lawyers, more power, and in the end, she lost. I still remember the day she came home from court, her frail shoulders trembling as she said, "I'm so sorry, Lana. I tried my best." I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I knew crying wouldn't change anything. Instead, I threw myself into my studies, working multiple jobs to support myself. I waited tables at a cafe, entered data for a small company at night, and sometimes wrote freelance articles for a news website just to make ends meet. Throughout 4 years of college, I never asked my father for a single cent, and he never once offered. When I went home for the holidays, nothing had changed. Margaret still played the role of the perfect wife. Max and Olivia were still the golden children, showered with attention, while I sat at the dinner table like a guest. I could feel my father's reluctance every time he looked at me. I saw the way he avoided my gaze whenever Margaret mentioned Olivia's study abroad expenses. Expenses that my father gladly covered, while I struggled to pay tuition on my own. Eventually, I stopped trying. I stopped coming home for the holidays. I declined invitations that felt more like obligations than genuine gestures. I stopped waiting for my father to change. But no matter how far I distanced myself, Margaret always found a way to remind me that I would never escape her disdain. And today, at this extravagant party, she did it again. I took a slow, deep breath, a faint smile curling at my lips as I turned to meet Margaret's gaze. "You really are careful, aren't you?" I said, my voice so calm that even I was surprised. "Have you figured out how you're going to explain this to my father yet?" Margaret hesitated for a split second, but then she recovered, smiling as if I were just a child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, Lana, you're always so sensitive. It was just a joke. Everyone knows that." "Really?" I arched an eyebrow. "So, if I tell everyone that you wrote this, do you think they'll find it funny too?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Margaret's face, but she quickly masked it. "Lana, you're overreacting. This is your father's birthday. Don't ruin his night." I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "You're worried I'll ruin his night? Maybe you should have thought of that before trying to make me the punchline of your joke." Before Margaret could respond, I picked up a glass of champagne from the table and strode toward the center of the room, where my father stood surrounded by his esteemed guests. Laughter and conversation filled the air. Max was bragging about his new job, one I was sure he had gotten through my father's influence. Olivia, as usual, was gushing about her upcoming lavish wedding, which I had heard was mostly funded by my father. I stood there for a moment, watching my father, the man I once admired, the man who had been my entire world when I was a child, but now felt like a stranger. He noticed me, his eyes slightly widening, as if he had forgotten I was even here. "Lana," he spoke, looking slightly uneasy. "I didn't think you would come." I gave a small smile. "Neither did I." I saw Olivia and Max exchange glances before looking toward Margaret, who stood behind them, trying to mask her discomfort. "Everyone seems to be having a great time," I said, swirling the champagne in my glass. "I suppose you're happy too, seeing everything go exactly as planned?" My father took a sip of his drink, as if carefully choosing his words. "Can we talk later, Lana? This isn't the time." "Oh, but I think this is the perfect time." I interrupted, my voice calm but deliberate. I slowly raised my champagne glass, gently tapping my fingernail against the rim, creating a soft clink. A few people nearby turned to look at me. I smiled. "I'd like to make a toast to my father." I saw my father's smile falter slightly, while Margaret narrowed her eyes in suspicion. "To my father, for having the perfect party, the perfect life, the perfect family," I said, my voice light but tinged with irony. "And to him, for teaching me a very valuable lesson." I paused for a moment, letting my words linger in the air. "I think you've had a bit too much to drink," Margaret interjected, her smile still fixed in place, but I caught the sharp glint of caution in her eyes. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of my presence settle over the room. My father looked as though he wanted to stop me, But he also knew that anything he said now would only make things worse. I'm completely sober. I lifted my champagne glass again, slowly scanning the room. But maybe some people here just aren't comfortable hearing the truth. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, inching away as if not wanting to get caught up in whatever was unfolding. Max crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips, clearly entertained, while Olivia sighed, tapping her fingernail lightly against her glass. In fact, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude, I continued, my voice steady and controlled. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Margaret, for teaching me one of the most important lessons of my life. A lesson I will never forget. My father frowned slightly. Lana, this isn't... I raised my hand slightly, cutting him off with a polite smile. It's okay, Dad, just a simple thank you speech. Margaret took another sip of her wine, still keeping her composed facade, but I noticed her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. Thank you, Dad, for showing me that some people only love you when you fit the role they've assigned to you. When you're obedient, silent, willing to stand in the background and not disturb their perfect little world. I turned to look directly at Margaret. And thank you for always reminding me that, in this family, I was never truly meant to belong. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests exchanged glances, clearly uneasy. But most importantly, I said, placing my glass gently on the table, thank you for helping me realize that I don't need anyone's approval here to know my own worth. The room was utterly silent. I met my father's gaze, then Margaret's, then Max's and Olivia's. So, I lifted my glass again, smiling faintly. Here's to the last time any of you will ever see me. And with that, I downed my champagne, set the glass down, turned on my heel, and walked out of the party. No one said anything, no one stopped me. I stepped through the doors, out into the parking lot, inhaling deeply. The cool night air was crisp, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. My phone started buzzing nonstop the moment I got home. Texts, calls, all from my family. My father had called 3 times, Margaret twice, and even Olivia had sent a short, irritated message. What the hell did you just do? I set my phone down on the table, not bothering to reply. My voicemail was flooded with long messages, mostly from my father. Lana, you can't just do this. This is your family. We need to stick together. We have to be there for each other. I stared at the screen, unwilling to listen any further. We weren't a family. A real family wouldn't treat me like an outsider in my own home. Only one message made me pause. Are you okay, Lena? It was from my aunt, the only person in my family who had ever been on my side. I picked up my phone, hesitated for a moment, then typed back, I'm better than ever. In the weeks that followed, I didn't attend any family events. No Livia's wedding, no my father's anniversary, no parties hosted by Margaret. Everything seemed to settle down, but I knew they were still waiting for me to come back. They thought I would soften, that I would apologize for overreacting. But I didn't. I started focusing on my own life. I traveled, met people who truly valued me. I built my career without any help from my family, and most importantly, I was no longer haunted by the need to earn my father's approval. One day, I received a letter from my father. Lana, I truly hope you reconsider. I don't want our family to be broken. Come home and talk. No matter how upset you are, we are still family. I folded the letter and placed it on the table without reading it a second time. My eyes skimmed over the neatly written words, but they didn't stir any emotion. No pain, no disappointment, no longing for validation that I had spent years chasing. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue over the rooftops, painting the world in a soft amber glow. I took a deep breath, embracing the stillness of my apartment. A few months ago, if I'd received a letter like this, I probably would have responded immediately, called to ask what he really wanted, wondered if there was a chance to mend things. But now, I wasn't so sure anymore. Did I do the right thing? Was cutting ties with my father and his family too extreme? I never wanted to be cruel. I never imagined that one day I would completely walk away from my father's life like this, but I also never wanted to continue being seen as a burden, an outsider in my own family. I had always hoped that one day my father would see me differently, that he would realize I wasn't difficult, I wasn't a troublemaker. I was just a person with value, a person with a life of my own. But maybe that hope was never real. I stood up and poured myself a cup of hot tea. Wrapping my hands around the warm mug, I reminded myself that I didn't have to respond to the letter right away. I could wait, think it through, and decide when I truly wanted to. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe I had embarrassed my father in front of his friends and family. Maybe I had hurt him in a way I couldn't take back. But maybe this was what I should have done a long time ago. I had spent my entire youth trying to earn my father's acceptance. I had sacrificed my own feelings, ignored countless times when I was overlooked, endured the blatant favoritism without ever fighting back, just to hope that one day he would finally see me as his daughter. But the truth was, I had never truly belonged in that family, and his birthday party was merely the final push, a reminder that no matter what I did, I would always be an afterthought in their world. I took a sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through me. Maybe I would never have a clear answer. Maybe I would never know for sure if I had done the right thing. But I knew one thing. Since walking out of that party, I had slept better, felt lighter, and no longer felt the need to become someone I was not. So, what had I really lost? I set my mug down and reached for my phone. My voicemail was still full of missed calls from my father, from Margaret, from relatives I had never truly been close to. But I no longer felt pressured to respond. Then I put my phone down, stood up, and stepped onto the balcony, breathing in the crisp evening air. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my father will keep trying to reach out or if he will finally accept that I have left his life. I don't know if I will ever regret my decision. But right now, I know that I have chosen myself. And maybe that's the most important thing. What do you think? Did I go too far, or was this something I should have done long ago? Lana's story is not just a personal tale. It's a reflection of so many people in real life who try to earn their family's approval, only to be met with indifference and rejection. Sometimes, letting go is not selfish. It's the only way to protect yourself from toxic relationships. Not everyone born into a family truly has a family in the meaningful sense. Most importantly, everyone has the right to choose their own happiness, even if that means walking away alone. What do you think about Lana's story? Did she go too far, or was this a decision she should have made long ago? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about family, life, and valuable lessons. I grew up in a family that from the outside seemed like the epitome of perfection. We lived in a grand mansion in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods, where tree-lined streets led to sprawling estates with gleaming black iron gates and meticulously manicured lawns. Our house had it all: a large swimming pool in the backyard, a private movie theater, and a garage spacious enough to accommodate my father's 3 luxury cars. My father, Andrew Callahan, was a successful entrepreneur who built his company from the ground up, turning it into a leading firm in the financial investment sector. He was the kind of man people respected: intelligent, decisive, and unwaveringly determined. My mother, Evelyn, was different. She never had to lift a finger, content with enjoying the wealth my father provided. To her, appearances mattered more than anything else. She was always dressed in expensive designer outfits, carrying the latest limited edition handbag she simply had to have because everyone in the elite women's club had one. I could count on one hand the number of times my mother truly spent time with me without being glued to her phone or engaged in conversations with her friends. My father loved me, but he was always busy with work. When I was little, most of my time was spent with a revolving door of nannies, each coming and going like a passing breeze. My mother was never satisfied with them, always finding a reason to fire them. There was only one person I truly bonded with: Linda. She was the only one who ever felt like real family. Linda didn't just watch over me. She read me bedtime stories, taught me how to bake cookies on weekends, and, most importantly, she listened. When my parents were too busy or simply didn't care, Linda was the one who held me close and told me I was special, that I deserved love just like any other child. But that joy didn't last long. One day, when I was 8, I walked into the living room and saw my mother standing with her arms crossed, glaring at Linda with a cold, hard expression. "I can't accept this," my mother said icily. "I saw you wearing a Cartier bracelet in the kitchen this morning. That's designer jewelry. Staff shouldn't be wearing things like that." Linda hesitated, then shook her head. "Mrs. Callahan, it was a birthday gift from my mother." "Really? Or did you take it from somewhere?" My mother tilted her head, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "I won't have household staff behaving like this." I froze. I knew Linda would never do such a thing, but it didn't matter. My mother had already made up her mind. The next morning, Linda was gone without a goodbye. I stood by the window, watching her walk to her car, feeling an empty hollowness settle inside me. As the years passed, I grew accustomed to not having anyone truly care about me aside from my father, but even he was increasingly consumed by work. I learned not to expect anything from my mother because every time I tried to get her attention, she would smile politely before shifting the conversation to her new dress or the upcoming cocktail party. Then, everything changed when I was 14. I remember that night vividly. My father came home later than usual, looking exhausted but still managing a smile as he walked through the door. I had noticed the dark circles under his eyes growing more pronounced in recent weeks. He had been working relentlessly on an important deal, doing everything he could to ensure it went smoothly. "Sweetheart, have you finished your homework?" he asked as he passed through the living room, where I was curled up on the couch. "Yes," I nodded. "Did you eat yet?" He gave me a tired smile. "I'll grab something later. I just have a few things to finish up first." But he never got the chance. That night, the shrill ring of the phone shattered the silence of our vast home. I heard my mother scream from the living room. I rushed down the stairs and found her clutching the phone, her hands shaking. "No! No! This can't be happening," she stammered before letting out a wail. It turned into a nightmare. My father had collapsed at his office, an unexpected heart attack. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. He was gone. The funeral was a blur of somber faces and whispered condolences. I remember standing beside my mother, listening to her sob for the guests, but I could see something else in her eyes. Not the grief of a woman who had lost her husband, but the fear of losing the luxurious life she had grown accustomed to. That fear quickly became a reality. My mother decided to take over my father's company, convinced that she could easily run it like a true businesswoman. I couldn't believe my ears when she confidently told the senior staff, "Women have a better instinct for business than men." Within 6 months, everything unraveled. The experienced financial directors who had worked under my father began resigning. Profits plummeted, investments failed, and my mother continued to spend lavishly as if we were still living in our golden days. Eventually, the company spiraled into a financial crisis. The debts piled up, shareholders lost confidence, and in the end, the company was forced to sell at a fraction of its actual value. We lost everything. The mansion that had once been my mother's pride was also seized by the bank to pay off debts. I stood on the lawn, watching moving trucks haul away every piece of luxurious furniture, feeling as if a part of my life was being carried away with them. We moved into a small house in the suburbs. My mother couldn't accept the reality that she was no longer a high society lady. But for me, the worst was yet to come. I packed my bags and left right after high school graduation. I had applied to multiple universities, but deep down, I knew I would choose one as far away from my mother as possible. I needed distance. I needed a new life, free from her manipulation, free from her constant complaints and passive-aggressive remarks about my responsibilities toward her. I received my acceptance letter from Crestview University, a prestigious school in another state, more than a 2-hour flight from my old town. I didn't tell my mother about my decision until everything was set. When I finally told her I would be leaving in a week, she stared at me as if I had just said the most absurd thing in the world. "You're just going to leave me all alone?" my mother asked, her voice sharper than usual. "I'm not leaving you, Mom. I'm going to college," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You could study somewhere nearby. Do you really need to run away like this?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, yes, I needed to leave. I needed to get out of her shadow and start over. Throughout my 4 years in college, my mother never called me first. Every time I reached out, her responses were always the same. Either complaints about her situation or guilt-tripping me for not fulfilling my duties as a daughter. "I have to pay all the bills myself now," she sighed during one of our rare phone calls. "There's no one to help me." I said nothing. I knew she was still receiving Social Security benefits and had some savings from selling the mansion, but for my mother, money was never enough. Ignoring her guilt trips, I focused on my studies. I couldn't afford to waste the opportunity I had fought so hard for. I worked harder than ever, dedicating all my time to my finance major. I knew that if I truly wanted to escape the cycle of my family, I needed a solid career. 4 years passed, and I graduated with honors. Within just a few weeks, I received a job offer from one of the most prestigious financial firms in the region. This job didn't just offer a dream salary, it also opened doors to career advancements I had never dared to imagine. Once I settled into my new job, I started thinking about my mother. Even though I knew she would never appreciate anything I did, I still felt responsible for helping her in some way. I decided to send her a fixed amount each month, $1,000, enough to cover her basic expenses. On top of that, I paid for some larger bills to ensure she had a stable life. At first, my mother didn't say much. She simply accepted the money I sent. But over time, I noticed a slight change in how she treated me. Her phone calls became less accusatory. Instead, she started inviting me out to dinner whenever I visited home. We chose small restaurants, places she never would have stepped into when she was wealthy. For the first time in years, I felt like we could actually talk without wealth and social status clouding our interactions. I thought that maybe over time, my mother had come to accept reality. But I was wrong. Her 55th birthday came as a complete surprise. I'd never received a formal invitation, just a short text from her. "Are you free Saturday night? I want to have a small dinner." I smiled when I read it. Though my mother had never been one to express gratitude, at least she wasn't making unreasonable demands. I assumed she simply wanted a small family gathering. That evening, as I stepped out of my car at the address she had sent, my heart sank. The restaurant in front of me was one of the most extravagant in the city. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, uniformed staff stood attentively at the entrance, and luxury cars filled the valet lot. I walked in, an uneasy feeling settling over me. When the host led me to the private dining area, I nearly couldn't believe my eyes. At least 30 people were scattered around elegantly draped tables. Not just family members, but also my mother's friends, people I had never met. They were all laughing, sipping expensive wine. My mother approached me, arms outstretched, beaming. "Jenna, I'm so happy you're here." I stood still, my breath growing heavy. "Mom, what is this?" "My birthday party," she said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I glanced around. Lavish dishes were being served, bottles of high-end wine glistened under the light. The only thing I could think about was the bill at the end of the night. "I booked everything in advance," my mother continued cheerfully. "You don't have to worry about a thing, just enjoy." A cold chill ran down my spine. "Did you tell me about this?" She frowned slightly, a hint of irritation crossing her face. "Jenna, don't make a big deal out of this. You're my daughter. You always pay for our dinners. What's the difference?" I looked at my mother for a long time, and for the first time in my life, I realized she had never changed. Even after losing everything, she was still the same person, the one who always assumed I was responsible for her, that my money was hers. I took a deep breath, reached into my purse, pulled out $200 and placed it on the table. This is my share. My voice was strangely calm. The rest is on you. The room suddenly fell into a tense silence. The guests around us stopped talking, their eyes filled with curiosity. My mother stared at me in shock. Jenna, what are you saying? I'm not paying for this dinner, I stated clearly. If you wanted to throw such a grand party, you should have told me beforehand. You can't just assume I'll cover everything. She stood frozen, then her expression shifted to anger. You are so ungrateful, she nearly shouted. After everything I've done for you? I didn't respond. I simply turned around and walked out of the noisy dining room, leaving behind the murmurs and whispers. This time, I wasn't coming back. I returned to my hotel, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. I didn't turn on the lights. The only glow came from the city outside, the towering buildings shimmering in the night, as if whispering about the life-altering decision I was about to make. I picked up my phone, took a deep breath, and started typing the steps that would change everything. First, I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic $1,000 monthly transfer to my mother. I watched the confirmation screen, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Next, I called the dealership where I had bought the Lexus for her 2 years ago. Hello, this is Jenna Callahan. I need to reclaim a vehicle under my name. Can I arrange for a tow truck to pick it up within 24 hours? Of course, Miss Callahan, the employee replied professionally. We'll send a driver to retrieve it first thing in the morning. After that, I opened my browser and accessed the website of the internet provider I had subscribed to for my mother. With just 3 clicks, I canceled the service, cutting off the high-speed connection she had been using for the past 2 years. Finally, I opened my social media app and typed out a straightforward post. Important announcement, as of today, I will no longer be providing financial support of any kind to my mother or any other family members. All previous arrangements have been terminated. Please do not contact me requesting money. I stared at the words for a moment, then pressed post. My phone buzzed instantly. Before I could read the first comment, I turned it off, tossed it aside, and curled up in the clean hotel sheets. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, when I turned my phone back on, a storm had erupted in my inbox. There were over 20 messages from my mother. The first few were filled with fury. What the hell are you doing? Do you know how humiliated I was last night? Who do you think you are? How dare you cut me off? Who gave you the right to do this? Then the messages turned more dramatic and guilt-ridden. You're leaving me to starve. Do you have any idea how much I sacrificed for you? When I didn't respond, she started begging. Jenna, please, just 1 more month. Just $500. That's all I'm asking. I locked my phone, threw it into my bag, and left the hotel without hesitation. In the following days, my relatives came after me relentlessly. Aunt Karen texted, Jenna, do you really think you can treat your mother like this? She raised you, and this is how you repay her? Uncle Mark called, his voice dripping with disappointment. Your father would be ashamed of you. I thought you were better than this. None of them asked how I was doing. No one cared about the years of manipulation, pressure, and unreasonable demands I had endured from my mother. They only cared about the money. I blocked all their numbers. My life changed immediately. Without the fixed monthly payments, I suddenly had financial freedom. I moved into a bigger apartment closer to the city center, where I could finally enjoy my own space. I booked a flight to Europe, spending my days traveling alone, exploring new places. I had never had the chance to before. No one could call me asking for money. No one could make me feel guilty for choosing to live my own life. 2 months later, my mother tried to reach out. She used a neighbor's phone to call me. When I answered, her voice was familiar, but this time, there was a hint of weakness. Jenna, I miss you, she said, as if nothing had ever happened. I'm sorry about the birthday party. I got carried away and didn't think it through. I stayed silent. That apology wasn't genuine. Can you help me out a little? She continued. I'm having trouble with this month's rent. Just this once, I promise I won't ask again. And that was the moment I knew she had never changed. I took a deep breath. Mom, I can't help you anymore. You have to take care of yourself. Jenna, you can't treat your mother this way. Her voice rose, filled with the familiar indignation. I am your mother. I paused, feeling lighter than ever. Then start acting like one. I hung up. This time, I felt no guilt. From that day forward, I never heard from my mother again. Occasionally, through friends or social media, I found out she had to move into a smaller apartment. She continued telling anyone who would listen that I was an ungrateful daughter, that I had abandoned her after everything she had done for me. But the ironic thing was, none of the people criticizing me actually stepped up to help her. They were quick to judge, but none of them ever extended the same support I once had. I no longer cared. I focused on my work, built my career, and enjoyed the life I had created for myself. I spent time with people who genuinely cared about me, people who didn't see me as an endless source of money. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still thought about my mother. Not because I missed her, but because I missed the mother I had never had. The kind of mother who would love her daughter without expecting anything in return. But that person had never existed. I no longer waited for an apology. I no longer hoped that one day she would change. Maybe, one day, if she truly understood, I would reconsider. But one thing I knew for sure. I would never go back to being my family's ATM again. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had never felt freer. Jenna's story is not just a personal one. It reflects the reality of many people in the real world. Those who are exploited by their families under the guise of love and duty. It proves that true love cannot be measured in money and that no one is obligated to bear financial burdens simply because of blood relations. Jenna chose to set boundaries, protect herself, and build her own life without being controlled by manipulation. Sometimes, cutting ties is the only way to find peace and true freedom. What do you think about Jenna's story? Have you ever been in a similar situation or known someone who struggled to break free from family control? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about family and life.